Marshall Saunders is the founder of Citizens Climate Lobby. This organization that he's created, its purpose is to create the political will for a stable climate and to empower individuals to have breakthroughs through exercising their personal and political power. Now, I've known Marshall for a very long time, and he is one of the great souls on the planet. When I think about inspirational people, he is at the top of that list. I met him when he was working on microcredit. He was very interested in ending poverty, and he was president of the Rotary Club of Coronado, and so he went to Rotary clubs to try to raise money for village banks. And he spoke to 175 clubs trying to raise money. And he spoke at 5 Rotary International conventions. He started his own village bank in Mexico. I mean, he would, and I'm trying to remember what a hassle it was every time you went to go there. You'd fly somewhere and then get on a donkey or something and go for miles. I mean, he just, and I didn't realize all the Rotary cred you have here.
Well,
Outstanding Rotarian in both his club and the district, Meritorious Service Award by the Board of Trustees of the Rotary Foundation, Distinguished Service Award by the Board of Trustees of the Rotary Foundation, well recognized by Rotary.
thank you.
Now, his organization that he created in 2007, and we'll talk a little about why he did that and all that, but I just want you to know that this organization has 100,000 volunteers. And last year in 2018, those citizen volunteer lobbyists had 1,406 meetings with offices of members of Congress. They spoke and tabled events more than 3,000 times. They wrote 61,000 letters to Congress, and more than 4,000 letters to the editor, op-ed pieces and editorials. And if you read the editorial page on the local papers, you will now know what that's all about. Because one day, a couple weeks ago, there were 3 letters from CCL volunteers. So they're amazing. Okay.
That's enough. Let's stop right there.
Okay, Marshall. We've known each other for a very long time. We were brought together because of our interest in doing something about poverty, especially microfinance. Tell us about that and your involvement with the advocacy group Results.
Sure. Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. You can hear me in the back, right? Okay, great. Well, first of all, you have a beautiful city. Our room upstairs looks out on the mountains and the snow, and it's just gorgeous. And what was the question? Oh, I also wanted to say that I am 80 years old now. Yeah. And I'll be talking along sometime and forget what I'm saying. So just be patient. Maybe, Scott, you can help me get going again. But the microcredit idea, the microfinance idea, is just a great idea. How many of you kind of know what that's about? Yeah, almost, well, Lord, almost everybody. But for those who don't know, tiny self-employment business loans to women, in the range of $50 to $100, and they start a little business for themselves and their family. They feed their family. They pay the loans back at a rate of about 98%. We have a savings account for them, so they save, and pretty soon they've got more money than they've ever seen before, and they pay enough interest so the operator can continue in business, because the poor need a permanent access to credit. So when Scott and I both came across this idea, and we found out, or Scott probably knew, that Results, this organization that was lobbying the Congress and the media, were lobbying for funds for these little loans. And there we raised like $100 million, $150, $175 million a year from the Congress. So it was amazing. And that's where I first came across this idea that I could meet with my member of Congress. I had no idea I could do that, and that I could, with a group of people, lobby the media.
So when you got started in doing that work, were you pretty savvy politically?
Was I savvy? Well, let me tell you about the first meeting. There was a member of Congress here, I know, but my first meeting where I joined this group that Scott was in, and they said, we're going to go to meet with a member of Congress. They didn't ask me if I wanted to go. They just said, we're going, and I was to talk about microcredit. And I knew something about it. So when we started the meeting, the Results group, the lobby team, were sitting in a circle, and the member of Congress, his name was Brian Bilberry, was sitting straight across from me. And I was nervous right away. He had a dark blue suit on and a beautiful tie, and I looked down at his shoes, and I could, black shiny shoes, and I could see the overhead lights reflected in his shoes. And I was nervous. And so the way the meeting went was that the people, the Results partners on my left, started talking about malaria. Then the next one might be tuberculosis, of course, and AIDS and all of that. And I was to be the last to talk. So it started over here, and meetings going on, and only thing I can think about are my legs. Where should they be? Where should they be? This is a simple question. And I found them crossed at the ankles, and I said, no, not across from the congressman. Not cross at, anyway, so I crossed them at the knees. I said, well, no, that's not right either. That's just too laid back. I can't be doing that with a member of Congress. And so pretty soon I just put them flat on the floor. And then there was this problem. The meeting's going on, so now they're talking about, say, AIDS. And only thing there's a problem with my arms. What am I going to, where should they be? I don't know. And then pretty soon, got all the way around, the lady on my right started talking. And I don't know, I have no idea what she was talking about, but but I knew I was going to be next. And so I thought, well, I have just enough time to run through my talk one more time. And that's when I discovered that I couldn't remember what I was going to talk about. I really couldn't remember. And I had this little prayer. I said, Lord, just give me the first two words. First two words. No answer. Lord, just tell me the sub. Just tell me the sub. You tell me this. I'll take it from there. No answer. So now the lady on my right was finished, and it was my turn. Everybody looked at me. And it's like, okay. Room was quiet. And the group leader, his name was Bruce Underhill, bless his heart, said, Marshall's going to be talking about the microfinance bill in the House. And I said, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The microcredit bill. So I started talking, and, I practiced it, like 50 times or something. So anyway, so that's how savvy I was. I was right. Professional. That's my professional. Anyway, that's it, Scott.
The first purpose of CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, is to create the political will for climate solutions by enabling individual breakthroughs in the exercise of personal and political power.
Right.
What does that mean? And have you personally had any such experiences?
Okay, yeah, right. What does that mean? Well, most people, almost all people, are just like me, and they have never done anything with their government. And I had one incident in which I wrote a letter to the city about the traffic in front of my house. I was upset about it. So that's the only thing I had ever done. So when I joined this group of results, as people lobbying, all volunteers lobbying the Congress, they said I was to write letters to the editor on all these different things. And so I tried it. Lo and behold, I got published a couple of times. I thought, that's nice. And then they wanted me to write opinion pieces. That was like 700, 800 words. And they gave me a lot of help on that, but that was a step up from the letters to the editor. And I got one of those published, or maybe two of them published. And then that was the next step, I guess, was just meeting with my member of Congress.
Well, the editorial.
Okay.
You want to get an editorial.
Yeah, well,
You
yeah,
remember that?
okay. So the results, this group wanted me to get the newspaper to write editorials about these different things that, particularly microfinance. And I didn't know how to do that. And so I looked in the newspaper at where they call it the staff, the letterhead, anyway, something. And so the top guy there, his name was Bob Kittle, and I called him up to talk to him about one of these issues.
This is the San Diego Union Tribune.
Yeah, right, the Union Tribune, and well, he didn't call me back. And I sent him a nice package of information, which was supplied to me by Results, and called him again, no answer. This, I hate to tell you, but this went on for about a year and a half. And this same guy, the group leader, Bruce Underhill, he said, Marshall, why don't you try somebody different? I said, brilliant. That's a great idea. So I called another guy, his name is Bob Caldwell, and he answered the phone on the first ring, first call ever. And let's see, so what happened? So I was so excited to be talking to one of the editorial writers at the paper. I just started talking, and pretty soon he said, "Stop reading to me." I said, "Mr. Call, I'm not reading to you. I'm just talking to you." Then I start talking again. You know, I'd practice up all these talks and no place to give them. I started talking again, and then pretty soon he says, I was expecting an important call and you were not it. You're not it. So I just thought for a minute and started talking again. And then he kept me on the phone for almost an hour. Almost an hour. And then he gave me, he was editor of the editorial section on Sunday, and he gave me almost the full front page and back page on microfinance. And I think there were like 6 beautiful color photographs of these women in the villages. And God, it was marvelous. I had no idea that I had that kind of power and influence. That was and results brought me along. You see, letters to the editor, opinion piece, editorials, and so they just kept encouraging me, and I didn't say no.
So what inspired you to create CCL?
Okay, why did I start the climate lobby? Well, first of all, I gotta say Al Gore's movie. I went to see that movie, and it blew me away. I had no idea how much trouble we had gotten ourselves into. And I wanted to do something, and I didn't know what to do, and so I kind of forgot about it. You know, and some time went by, and I read in the magazine that he was going to train 1,000 people. Going to train 1,000 people, and so I got selected, and I got trained up. I got the slideshow. I practiced that thing more than 100 times. I hate to tell you how many times, but I really practiced it, and I gave that talk 50 to 50 groups over the next year. Most of all, it was Rotary clubs. I bet you there were like 40, maybe a few more Rotary clubs. The only people who wanted to hear what I had to say. They needed a speaker every week. So, where am I?
What inspired you to create CCL?
Well, I forgot. Okay, so I'm in the middle of giving these 50 talks, okay? I'm practicing 2 or 3 times every time I give them. And I went out to get the newspaper one morning. I had given a talk the night before, went out to get the newspaper, sat down at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee, and read in the paper that the Congress, the day before, had given $18 billion in tax credits to fossil fuel companies. $18 billion. And I thought, in all my talks, have I gotten 18 people to change their light bulbs? I don't know. And I thought, this is not going to work. Anything I do is going to be overwhelmed by what the government does or doesn't do. The essential problem I saw from all my presentation was that we, people, were taking carbon out of the ground and putting it in the atmosphere. Carbon out of the ground, putting it in the atmosphere. It doesn't sound like a good idea to begin with. So, where am I?
So, what then led to CCL?
Okay, right. Okay, so I was giving these talks. I got an invitation from the Rancho Bernardo Rancho Bernardo International Affairs Club. And I thought, great, this is going to be great. A lot of lively people, about 50 people. We'll have a great conversation. And when I got up there, it was the Foreign Affairs Club in the Rancho Bernardo nursing home. And, there were about 10 people. They were tired of the television. They came down to hear what I had to say. So I gave them the slideshow, fires, floods, melting ice, terrible storms, all that stuff. And I finished it up and I said, any questions? And an elderly, look, I was 68 at the time, and these people look old to me. And she raised her hand and she said, I can't read with the new light bulbs. I can't read with it. What should I do? And I had no idea what to tell her what to do. And then she said, would it be okay if I used 2 of the new light bulbs? And I said, I don't know. And she said, well, which would be better, one of the old kind or 2 of the new kind? Which is better? So I say, I don't know. And then another lady says, well, what should we do? And I thought for a minute, I felt kind of trapped, and I started describing what Scott and I had been doing for a dozen years about lobbying the Congress. What's needed is thousands of volunteers, all educated about the same thing, all saying the same thing, meeting with their members of Congress, meeting with editorial boards, dedicated people, and the volunteers doing the work. That's what's needed. And she said, well, why don't you do that? Why don't you do that? And I said, I'm telling you that this is the way it happened. I said, nobody would come to a meeting like that. And she said, I'll help you. And so now you can see I'm trapped, right? There's these 10 elderly people, very elegant elderly people. And what am I going to say? So I said, okay, let's do it. And so I went home. I started inviting people, made the flyer and all that stuff. And I called my new friend, and she didn't answer the phone. And I called her again. She didn't answer the phone. I called her a third time, no answer. On the fourth time, her husband answered the phone. He said, Lee's arthritis is kicked up and she can't help you. And I thought, oh my God, I'm all alone. Well, anyway, the event occurred. I was astonished that 29 people showed up. And after I finished talking, it was a conversation. After we finished talking, it's like I asked him the punchline question. And, my heart was in my throat. I needed 4 people to have a team, to start their lobby team. And so I said, who wants to do this thing with me? And it's like almost everybody in the room raised their hand. Almost everybody wanted to play this game. And so
11, 12 years later, last June, Marshall had 1,300 people gathered for a conference in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And then they went up on Capitol Hill and met with the offices of more than 500 members of Congress.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, I often hear members of Congress and their staff say they love to meet with CCL volunteers, even those who may disagree about climate.
Yeah.
I hear about the CCL way.
CCL Way, right.
What's that?
Okay, CCL Way. A little story. We have a great executive director. His name is Mark Reynolds, and he was born and raised in Salt Lake City. Lived at 2nd Street and Virginia Avenue. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay, and he's a great guy. And he's a great guy because people love him, and he loves people. And that's the key to it. He loves people. So, what was the question?
CCL way.
Okay, CCL.
Howard, I mean,
Okay,
this
so-
is a different kind of politics than people are used to.
Okay, no question about it. And it comes from Mohandas K. Gandhi. Somebody told me, Marshall, if you want to be an expert on Gandhi, you have to read at least 7 books. So I found 7 thin books about Mohandas K. Gandhi. And so when Mark came to work, I said, Mark, I've known him for a long time. Mark, there's your desk, there's your telephone, and I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder. Go get them. And I walked back to my office, and I thought about that little story about Mohandas K. Gandhi. And before he did his momentous work in India, he led the protests against what was called the Black Laws in South Africa. And one day he found himself face to face across the desk from the president of the government. The president of the government was a general in the army. His name is Jan Schmutz, and a tall man, six foot tall. And Gandhi's across the desk from him. Gandhi's less than 5 feet. No military uniform, but rather he's got on what's called a dhoti, or like a big diaper. And so the general says, well, Mr. Gandhi, what can I do for you? And Gandhi says, well, I've come to tell you that I'm going to fight your government. Oh, okay. Anything more you want to tell me? And Gandhi says, I'm going to win. And Schmutz must have thought he was hearing things. And he says, well, how are you going to do that? And Gandhi said, with your help. And years later, General Schmutz said, that's just about what happened. Now, Mark began to lead people in that way. And every climate lobby person has that in their training. That's one of the first things that they hear from us, is the way Gandhi changed first South Africa, and then secondly, India, and the British left without firing shots. So it's amazing. So that's the way we go about it. And another thing, CCL way, is Mark Reynolds from Salt Lake City is happy. And so, the partners are happy.
So it's a nonpartisan group. It meets with our political leaders, and they seek relationships based on shared values,
Right.
Trust, and integrity. So the offices, even the ones that don't agree with them, they trust the information, they trust the people that are visiting with them.
Yeah, we give very good information, and the first thing we do when we meet with a member of Congress is to thank him or her for something that they have done. We look into their past, pick out something, and give them a generous acknowledgement and appreciation.
So, April issue of the Rotarian magazine. So Marshall is profiled in this issue. And Barry Rassin, president, is interviewed in this issue, and he calls for Rotary to start the conversation about climate. Where do we go from here?
Well, RI President Barry Rassin had it exactly right. What there is to do is to begin the conversation. He said, as a charitable organization, Rotary has an obligation to talk about climate change. He said it's not one of the 6 areas of focus, but it is intertwined with every single one of them. Oh, and then he said this great thing, very insightful. He said, we have been so successful with the polio campaign, not because we supplied the vaccine, but because we were able to talk to the right people. Rotarians were able to talk to the right people. And Rassin said, if we did that with the environment, governments would listen. Governments would listen. And look, it's such an honor and a privilege to be here, to talk to you. I appreciate it so very, very much. And Rotary, I used to think about this, Rotary is the world's greatest civil society. The world's greatest civil society. And governments will and do listen to you. And so let's have the conversation. Let's not be afraid of it. And remember the way Gandhi related to the government. And
Marshall, thank you so much
You're
for being
welcome.
with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.